Well, it's about that time for me to give you an updated 2015 NFL mock draft, so that's exactly what I've done, a 2-round edition for your reading, viewing pleasure down in the description box down below. Now, let me go about explaining some of the things pertaining to this mock draft. I have to say that for me, as I've been doing these mock drafts over the past couple of months, I've struggled more in doing them than I have in previous years, and part of the reason for that is, to me, there's a lot of fluidity in terms of the prospects and where they could potentially rank. And also, when I look at it, it's just kind of hard to envision what some of these teams might do based off of the fluidity of those prospects and their rankings and where they could potentially fit on the board. It really jumbles things up. Now, as you will notice in my mock draft, I still have quarterbacks going 1 and 2 in the 2015 NFL draft, and I still believe that that's what we're going to see come Thursday, April 30th. And that does help to kind of slot the draft in its proper order, at least in the first few picks. Now, the one thing you'll notice, though, this time is that I have a change at number 1, and I have Marcus Mariota of the Oregon Ducks going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's starting to be some reports out there about some of the people involved with the Buccaneers, perhaps some of the brass at the highest levels, maybe the ownership group, not being as comfortable with Jameis Winston and his total package, especially off the field. Maybe there's some viewpoint that maybe Mariota isn't as far away as a prospect as Winston is, and he's so much more safer, so maybe he's the better guy to go with at number 1. When I look at this pick between Winston and Mariota for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because ultimately they're where the draft begins at number 1, to me this will come down to very simply who's in charge. If the coach and the general manager are in charge, and in particular Lovie Smith has his way, I believe it's Jameis Winston all day. Just from my experience of being a Bears fan and watching Lovie Smith for 9 years, it's just the sense that I get that Jameis Winston would be his guy. If ownership are the ones that are calling the shots, and they ultimately have the right to do so because it's their team, I could see where they would go with Marcus Mariota. And I think come April 30th, you're going to find out who's really in charge of the organization and who's really running the show. Now, for my money, as I've said before, I would take Marcus Mariota because I believe long-term he's a better prospect than Jameis Winston. Not by a lot, not by a ton. I think both guys will end up being franchise NFL quarterbacks. It's just I prefer Mariota because I do think he's so much cleaner off the field, and I don't think he's quite that far away as a prospect from a physical tool standpoint as many of you have been led to believe by the NFL draft media over the past 12 months or so. With that said, with Mariota going number 1 in this particular scenario, it jumbles things up in terms of number 2, in terms of who might potentially be looking up at Jameis Winston as their long-term answer as a franchise quarterback. And in this particular scenario, I've got the Jets trading up from 6 to 2. Because it would be Winston, I believe that there would be less of a prohibitive price tag of moving up from 6 to 2 as opposed to if Mariota was there, in part because, again, some of Winston's off-the-field baggage teams not be willing to throw as much in terms of a compensation package in order to make that move up the board to 2 to get a Winston. Now, personally, I would advocate the New York Jets doing it because you have to do something. They have to find that guy. And Jameis Winston might be the best opportunity they have to find that guy at quarterback for years to come. Now, from the Tennessee Titans standpoint, I completely do not advocate this. I think them dealing down is dumb. They're 2-14 last year. They suck on all sides of the ball. They lack an identity. They really don't have, outside of maybe Jarrell Casey, any really true star players. They need a franchise quarterback badly in the worst way. And I think for them to trade back, as I have them doing in this scenario, from 2 to 6 just to accumulate additional picks, doesn't really get the job done because, as you saw with the St. Louis Rams, yeah, everybody praised them to kingdom come because of that great draft pick compensation package they got from moving down in 2012. First from 2 to 6 when the Redskins moved up to take RG3, and then from 6 to 14 when the Cowboys moved up to take Morris Claiborne. However, at the end of the day, what the fuck has that meant for the St. Louis Rams? It's meant nothing. They still don't have a for sure answer at quarterback, no matter what you believe about Nick Foles heading into 2015. And this is a team that went 6-10 in 2014. When you have the chance to take that guy, you take that guy and you don't blink. And the shameful thing is that for the Titans, Winston probably fits better than Mariota what Wisenhunt wants to do on offense. But for some reason, I do believe some of the reports that the Titans are very high on Zach Mettenberger. Maybe they just don't put as much of a premium on the quarterback position, and they'll do the stupid thing. Now, in terms of the top 4 picks in this draft, I feel pretty confident at this particular point in time that this is how it will play out, that it'll be some combination of Mariota and Winston 1 and 2. What order it'll be, that's yet to be determined. We've still got a couple of weeks left to go. I think Fowler goes 3 to the Jaguars. I think Kevin White goes 4 to the Oakland Raiders unless they're morons. Sorry, for those of you that are advocating for Leonard Williams, at the end of the day, if you're sticking with Derek Carr, if he's going to be your guy, and you want to find out if he could be your guy, drafting a defensive lineman who you're not even sure about a systematic fit for Jack Del Rio's 4-3 defense is not the way to go. Getting that big-time #1 wide receiver in this draft is the way to go. Where things really start to get kind of screwy for me in this draft is that range between picks 5 and 10. I really have a hard time mocking this. This is where I always get stuck every time I've done the mock draft for the past 2 months. I try to throw some trades in there to have it make some sense. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, for example, in this case, I did Brandon Scherff going 5 to Washington. Personally, I think it's ridiculous that people are talking about Brandon Scherff as a top 10 pick. I've seen some talk about how clean his tape is. What the hell have they done to scrub his tape? His tape is far from clean, and I'm sorry, this draft isn't the greatest, but it's not 2013 bad, where you should be considering taking an interior lineman at number 10, or at least nothing else more than a right tackle, and that's what Brandon Scherff is to me at the NFL level. Now, with that said, he does seem like, because of his physicality, because of his toughness, that he would be a good fit for the Washington Redskins. It might be a situation, I'll just caution you, where I'm envisioning the player fit more than necessarily the pick fit. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Washington Redskins ended up with Brandon Scherff. I'm just not sold that it would necessarily be at pick number 5. I've got Leonard Williams going 6 to the Tennessee Titans because, again, I think Leonard Williams has been slightly overrated by the NFL draft media, and I think based off of systematic fits and the way the board plays out, this is a good fit. Tennessee still gets their guy at 6, which will make some Titans fans, I guess, happy, but at the end of the day, you'll always be looking, and you'll be wondering, we could have had Jameis Winston instead of this guy. Can Leonard Williams play quarterback? I mean, you know, you look at pick 7, I think that's about the range that Amari Cooper's going to go, somewhere between 5 and 7. I think it's conceivable to see the Redskins perhaps take him at number 5. Or if the Raiders take Cooper at number 4, I think White is a given for the Redskins at number 5 because they need a bigger receiver on the outside. Now, in terms of Amari Cooper, if he's there at number 7, he's definitely in play for the Chicago Bears. A team like St. Louis could move up for him. They'd only have to move up a few picks, and the price wouldn't be all that prohibitive. And for a team like the Bears, they need to accumulate some additional draft pick currency for their rebuild. It would make sense for all parties involved. You'll see a couple of edge rushers going 8-9. Some of you might be surprised with me having the Bears taking Ereck Flowers at number 10. Well, at that particular point in time, frankly, the board is kind of wishy-washy. Like I said, it's very fluid. I love Danny Shelton a lot. I'm just not convinced at this moment that some teams will view him as a top 10 pick because of the position he plays, and teams wondering how much they actually run a true 3-4, and maybe some teams believing that he can only play that nose tackle, even though I don't necessarily agree with that assessment. Remember, a lot of times when I do these mock drafts, it's not so much what I think teams should do, it's as much what teams will do based off of scenarios and trends and everything else. In terms of the Bears taking Ereck Flowers, though, here's an offensive tackle that's only 20 years of age. That, to me, can be a long-term blindside protector at the NFL level. My number 1 rated offensive tackle in this class. Furthermore, when you're looking at the Bears, Jermon Bushrod hasn't been that good in his last 2 seasons with the Bears. Jordan Mills isn't that good at all, period. And he's had 2 seasons to prove that for the Bears. They need help at offensive tackle, both short-term and long-term. Short-term at right tackle, long-term at left tackle. Because eventually the Bears are going to move on from a salary cap standpoint from Jermon Bushrod. And drafting a guy like Ereck Flowers, to me, at this point in time, could make some sense in terms of a best player available type of scenario. Now, in terms of other things that might surprise you a little bit, I've got the Dolphins taking Breshad Perriman at number 12. Now, to me personally, I think this is ridiculous. I don't understand why so many people are falling in love with Perriman as a prospect. Like I see, Mel Kiper's got him rated as a top 10 prospect. And he did that years back, I remember, with Roddy White coming out of UAB, where at one point in time he had him like as a 7th rated prospect on his board. I agreed more with that assessment back then than I do with Breshad Perriman now. This guy can't catch the ball. He does make some spectacular catches, I grant you. He's big, and in theory, he can fly, but that speed does not always translate to the game film. He drops a lot of easy catches, and I don't think he's all that great of a route runner. While he's got the pedigree with his dad, Brett, having played in the NFL for many years, most notably with the Detroit Lions, that alone, to me, doesn't make a guy worth a mid-first round pick. Just because a guy ran a 4.2 something in his 40 doesn't mean he should be going in the top 15 or 16 of an NFL draft. Darius Hayward-Bay was really fast. Troy Williamson was really fast. Just because guys are really fast doesn't mean they're good and doesn't mean they're worth taking that high. Personally, when I look at it, I see a guy like Devante Parker as a far superior prospect, but it wouldn't surprise me at all at this point to see Breshad Perriman be the number 3 wide receiver taken in this 2015 NFL draft. I expect several offensive linemen to be taken in round number 1, even though I don't think this is the best class for offensive linemen, and I'd be surprised if some of these linemen didn't drop a little bit just because some of these ones that have been taken in the first round over the past couple of years haven't exactly panned out the best. Teams still, I think, are of that mindset that offensive tackles are a safe pick in the first round. You're always wanting to improve your trenches because that's a way to impact multiple facets of your offense, which is true. As a result, I still expect several offensive linemen to go in round 1, and you see other guys that have moved up the board as the draft process has gone along, like DJ Humphries and Jake Fisher, who I think are pretty close to being safe first-round picks in that 25 to 32 type of range. You'll see I have the Arizona Cardinals trading up to get Todd Gurley at number 15 because, in part, they might not be able to get Adrian Peterson via a trade. I look at this, and it's still, even with a couple weeks to go, I feel far from certain about my mock draft. I've got to see some more. Frankly, I've got to see some more rumors, some more reports, kind of feel the breeze in terms of way things are going to be able to start slotting out trades. I expect there to be some movement and some activity in terms of trades in this first round of the 2015 NFL draft. Are there going to be 4 or 5 trades? Are there going to be 8 or 9? I can't really say. What's really going to be important is what happens when that first team does something that teams weren't expecting, that first team that kind of surprises everybody. Does that throw the entire draft into chaos? In this particular scenario, the thing that would be most likely to make that happen is if the Washington Redskins took Brandon Scherff at number 5. If that were to happen, and I'm not saying that's likely to happen, now I'm not saying again that should happen because I most certainly don't believe that's the case, but it's in that range, somewhere between 5 to 10. Where that one team is really going to step outside of the box and take somebody that nobody was really anticipating, nobody was planning on, nobody was expecting, that could really throw the entire first round into complete and total anarchy and chaos, which frankly can make the draft much better to watch, and for certain teams can make the draft much better because they have the better ability to have somebody drop to them that they rated much higher and as a result didn't anticipate being there. So we will see. You're welcome to chime in with your thoughts on what I had your team do in each of the 2 rounds of this 2015 NFL mock draft. You can let me know what you think your team should do, what you think about my mock draft in general, all of that shit. Let me know down below.